The hardest job for me to get was actually that internship at the North Stars, because I had been calling and cold calling all the sports teams, but also all sorts of other places. And I just didn't feel like I was differentiated from anybody. But then once I got that role at the North Stars, then you have an opportunity to meet people. And so here, getting a full-time job with benefits, which obviously is such a big deal, and all that good stuff, was easier almost than getting an unpaid internship.
This is the Workin' Sports Podcast.
If you want the world of sports employment opportunities to open up for you, you have to consider sales. Now, to be clear, there is not one path to success in the sports industry. I've never worked in sales. I've made that clear to everybody. But as I've gone through my career and I've talked to many people and I've observed potential, one thing that has become clear is that the wide world of opportunity opens if you have sales experience and can prove that you can generate revenue for an organization. Today's guest, Mike Snee, is the perfect example. After almost a decade working in various sales roles with the Minnesota Wild, culminating as the director of corporate sales, Mike leaned into his passion for hockey and became the executive director of College Hockey Inc., a group working with college athletic departments and the NHL to promote the opportunities brought forth by college hockey. It's a passion play that he is the ultimate leader of as the executive director. And his sales background and his ability to work all of those business functions is what allowed him to follow a passion in the industry and make it work. So we're going to let Mike Snee talk you through all this, because Mike has some of the most actionable and positive career advice that you all need to hear. Hey, Mike. So great to meet you. Thanks for coming on the show. How are you?
I'm good. Good to meet you as well, and I appreciate the opportunity to visit with you.
Yeah, it's a really cool niche that I don't think we've spent enough time in, college hockey, so there's a lot to talk about there. We've had a lot of guests from the hockey world, a lot of fans that really gravitate towards the content when we talk hockey, so let's dive into this a little bit. Suffice it to say, outside of a stint that you had with the Minnesota Timberwolves, most of your professional experience has been in hockey. You're from Minnesota, the land of hockey. What led to this love affair that you're currently turning into this great career path?
It certainly wasn't a plan, I can tell you that.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, and especially like College Hockey Inc., it wasn't even around. It's a 12-year-old organization, so I at no point in my life did I say someday I want to work for College Hockey Inc., because I didn't even know about it, nor was it around. So it's a good question. I have, not only am I from Minnesota, Brian, I'm from northern Minnesota.
Mm-hmm.
So even a little more hockey cred there. I say that as a little jab to all my friends from Minneapolis, St. Paul. But I grew up in Duluth, which is up in northern Minnesota, and so I had a long time, my entire life, just hockey was part of my life, not in any kind of like noteworthy way whatsoever, but just something I loved to play, something I loved to watch, something that my friends and I, we did together. And if it was the wintertime, it was hockey. If it was the summertime, it was baseball, that kind of thing. So pretty typical probably to a lot of people today, and just how people fall in love with sports. I would say the best break I had was my dad worked for a radio station in Duluth that happened to be the station that carried the North Stars and the Twins and all the sports teams and so on. And he came across somebody who worked for the North Stars. He had meetings with the North Stars from time to time. I was just finishing up college at the University of St. Thomas in St. Paul. I was an economics and political science major. This was back in 1991. So I don't think like the sports world was an industry yet. I don't think. I know teams didn't have like staffs of 200 people, and so on. So they happened to strike up a conversation, and then this person with the North Stars was nice enough to tell my dad, "Well, have your son give me a call." And this was in the summertime after I graduated in 1991, and ended up connecting with that person. And timing was right, and they were looking for an unpaid intern, and I was basically unemployed and doing some basic, service type jobs just to pay my rent and so on. And started with an unpaid internship at the Minnesota North Stars. And then just from there, I loved it. I think because I loved it, I did well in it. That's important. And then just opportunities presented themselves down the road. And as much as maybe you don't want me to say this, I wouldn't say any of it was by design. It was a good, like a fortunate opportunity in the beginning. And then just from there, take advantage of it. And then here I am today.
I think that's great to say. I think I've shared on this show many times before. I laughed when you said you were an economics and poli-sci major because I was a biology and chemistry major.
Okay.
For the first 2 years. I ended up changing, but I was for my first 2 years of college. That's the direction I was headed as well. So sometimes there can be some happenstance that leads us to the right path.
Yeah.
It's getting more competitive out there, though. So people focusing earlier. I mean, sports management majors weren't really a thing when I went to college, and I'm sure you felt the same way. But
Yeah, that's a good note, because as I was thinking about what we're going to talk about, I never had an internship until that internship at the North Stars. So like my summers in college, I was grounds crew at a golf course. I was a laborer at a plumbing contracting company. Just making money for school and for life and stuff. And my recollection is none of my friends had internships either. We were all doing the same thing, where now I have children. I have an older son who's just finished up college, a daughter who's in college. And it feels like, the pressure to have an internship early in your collegiate career. And so I do think these young people are coming out more prepared, and it is a more competitive environment than it was in 1991.
You had another interesting step, but you went from the North Stars and you worked with the Timberwolves for a while. And then you also did an internship in the minors with the Minnesota Moose. Was that an internship or was that a job?
That was actually, so I did an internship with the North Stars for 9 months and absolutely loved it. I mean, the North Stars were such an important part of my childhood. So to actually be working there, at 22 years old and in the offices of their Met Center arena, I don't want to ever forget how I felt doing that. It was just pretty cool to be able to call that place where I went to work. And then for the benefit of the people listening to this, what happened, and I think what I took advantage of, I don't even know if I knew I was doing it at the time, but you just start to meet people at the other teams. And I've said to myself, or my son who now is in sports, the hardest job for me to get was actually that internship at the North Stars. I mean, that felt like, because I had been calling and cold calling all the sports teams, but also all sorts of other places. And I just didn't feel like I was differentiated from anybody. I mean, I just was out of college. I did okay academically, econ major, whatever. But then once I got that role at the North Stars, then you have an opportunity to meet people, talk to people, have them get to know your work ethic and creativity and so on. And so I got to know people at Timberwolves, and they had an opening, and it just felt so much easier getting that job because I knew those people going into the interview. They had a comfort level with me. And so here, getting a full-time job with benefits, which obviously is such a big deal, and all that good stuff, was easier almost than getting an unpaid internship because of the ability to build those relationships. So I then went to the Timberwolves for 2 years. I was the typical account executive selling group and season tickets. Then got to know people at the Timberwolves and so on. And then the North Stars then would leave. They went to Dallas. And then they brought a minor league team, the Minnesota Moose, to town in 1994. And the person they hired as the president was a guy I worked with at the Timberwolves. And he came and asked if I'd want to be the director of ticket sales. So now all of a sudden I'm 25. I'm hired to hire a staff, manage a staff, put in place a marketing plan, do all the number of different things that I was able to do at 25 in that environment was, looking back on it now, even though it was 2 years, because the team was only around 2 years, it was really impactful for me. And I think it was noteworthy that because it was in a minor league environment where there's fewer people, you do a lot more things. Some of the things which are I guess you could call glamorous or whatever, but then a whole lot of things that aren't, that maybe you wouldn't do if you're working for a major league team where you have one defined role, like I had at the Timberwolves, which was selling group and season tickets.
There's so many great pieces of advice in there. And I want to harken back to what you said and just make sure I hit this with everybody. Networking, relationship building is not something you do while in college and then forget about. Like, this is a very continual process. Meeting people in the industry, it's a small world, and that connectivity has to continue going throughout your entire career, and building those relationships is absolutely so important. And secondarily, like that experience with minor league is like nothing else. And we tell everybody all the time, like, look at minor league baseball, look at minor league hockey, look at all these different opportunities, because that's really where you get to see and be involved in so many different parts and doing so many different things. And it gets you exposed to what you like, what you don't like, what areas you want to pursue. And it's such a great, like, for the love of the game environment, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. And you're right. I mean, I did more than I like to think of myself, I guess, as more marketing and sales are where I like to be. Probably as I age, I skew more towards marketing than sales. But you do a lot of everything. So you also get to eliminate some things like, man, if I was ever kind of tempted or intrigued by that, I tried it and I'm no longer tempted or intrigued by it.
Right, exactly. You got to know though.
Yeah, those are important things to do, is also to eliminate things that, to figure out that, that doesn't really get me terribly excited. So clearly that's important. And on the networking piece, I don't even know if I knew I was doing it. I think I just enjoy meeting people. And then since it's in this environment, sports, that I really like, you tend to meet people that you're interested in because they're in it too. And you're just forming friendships and relationships. And then as I've aged, a lot of this stuff is as I've aged, because I've aged. You look back on it, and now I can look at the role I'm in now, and the role I'm in now, I only got introduced because a person who I worked closely with for probably for 10 years would end up kind of moving into the creation of this job and recommended me for it. So when I was working with that person back now 20 years ago, I wasn't saying to myself, hey, I'm doing this and I'm enjoying working with this person because someday he's going to lead me to a dream job. It just kind of evolved. But the critical thing was, got to know this person, got to know a lot of people, enjoyed being around them and getting to know them. And then, as you said, sometimes those leads to doors being opened.
Yeah. And I think a spirit of curiosity where like, I could see you being like, oh my gosh, that person works for the Timberwolves. That's interesting. I want to learn more about how they do things versus how we do things. And there's opportunity there to learn from one another. And then the next thing you know, you have a relationship with this person and it turns into something positive, even if your intent at the beginning was just to be curious, to meet other people, to have that kind of environment. I just think that spirit needs to be entrenched within people trying to break into our industry.
Yeah, and I'll say, we talked about what we studied in school. And I'm open to informational interviews all the time. People did it for me, and I'm happy to talk to anybody that wants to. And also, if you want to major in sports marketing, that's great. Do that, but don't limit yourself to just that because you want to do it. And I look at I chose economics and political science because I was interested in those subjects, but also because they're not like right or wrong type things. They're fields where it's basically like constant discussion, constant thought provoking, and nobody's right or wrong. And that I enjoy that. I enjoy my wife says I might like to argue, but I'd say just more. But what I would say to somebody is what you're learning in school as much as anything is the ability to learn and the ability to be curious. And so if you take that into your professional life, just constantly learn and constantly want to learn and want to know more. And if you find a field that you're sincerely and genuinely interested in, it's a pretty cool connection to come into it like already having the skill of curiosity and then being in a field where you're genuinely curious about it.
Yeah, for sure. You're leaning a lot into the economics side, which I think is really interesting in your background. And I have to imagine when the North Stars, like you're early in your career, the North Stars are a fixture in Minnesota in a hockey land, and then they pack up and move to Dallas. Was that a instrumental moment in understanding the business side of sports, or was that just a gut punch that you never get past?
Oh, it was a personal gut punch. I'd actually already left the Timberwolves. So my season at the North Stars was their second to last year. And then my first year at the Timberwolves was the last season of the North Stars. So to see them go, it was awful for the 12-year-old me because that was that was such part of my life, and then actually having to work there, and then they go, and then a couple years later they blow up the arena. So just awful stuff. From a standpoint here in Minnesota, we've got a unique hockey culture where college hockey means a ton, high school hockey means a ton.
Yeah.
So there was enough hockey here that hockey survived and continued to flourish, even though the North Stars left. And then, it felt like forever, but it was, just 7 years later that the Minnesota Wild would start play. So the NHL wasn't gone that long, even though it felt like it was longer than that.
It did. It felt like a long time. I also think the North Stars and maybe a couple in the Whalers had the greatest uniforms ever. Like I loved those uniforms growing up. So I think that was a big loss for all of us.
I'm still in Minnesota. I live in Minneapolis and work in St. Paul. I work in the Minnesota Wild offices. And if you've seen the Wilds, they call it the reverse retro jersey.
Yeah.
It's the same color scheme as the North Stars.
Love it.
There's a huge informal via social media movement here to make that their full-time uniform. And I got to say, when I see it, man, it's pretty sweet.
Brings back some memories, I bet.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that, though. You came over to the Wild when they were still an expansion concept, right? It was a couple of years before they actually launched. You were one of the early employees. What were those early days like? Because now you're going startup life in a way.
Yeah, it was a blast. It was kind of like the benefits of what you got in minor league sports, but only doing it in the National Hockey League. So, first of all, it was just wonderful people. I was hired in July of '98, and they started play in October of 2000. So a little less than 2.5 years. Yeah. And the people involved from the Nagley family, Bob Nagley was the primary investor, on down to the leadership there at the time. It was Matt Maka, Todd Leiweke, Bill Robertson, a woman named Martha Fuller, just these people who were great for me to learn from. They gave Jack Sperling. How did I forget him? Jack Sperling was involved, but they also gave you so much, what I would just say is ability to be a leader and be creative and contribute. So I felt like coming in, you made an impact. There are some things that happened there that you feel some personal pride in. And so we built that up, and it was unique at the time. I have to remind myself, they were the first major pro team here in Minnesota to locate in St. Paul. And at the time that was looked upon as a negative, like that's going to hold back the success. And it turned out to be the furthest thing from it. In fact, I think being in St. Paul adds to the charm of the Minnesota Wild and the success of the Minnesota Wild. But those early days were, when you are creating something, like I joined the Timberwolves. Timberwolves were already up and running. They already were what they were. I had a great experience there, but that's what it was. And that's just the way it was. To have the good fortune of being literally something from truly the ground floor. I mean, even like from the basement, you get in there and you're building the foundation. And looking back, I've just had pretty good luck to be able to find myself at places where, not only is it a great job, but it's a unique moment in the existence of that organization, like College Hockey Inc. and certainly like the Minnesota Wild in the early days. And then to be part of the behind the scenes stuff that led to these iconic things like this phrase, the state of hockey, this holiday that basically the Wild created called Hockey Day Minnesota that we just celebrated last weekend. That's this wonderful celebration of hockey in the state. And at one time didn't exist and wouldn't exist if not for the Minnesota Wild. And being able to see how they chose their marketing is so oriented to getting kids in Minnesota to play hockey and celebrating all levels of hockey in the state. So it personally, I would say like working for the Wild was a great job, but it also it felt like I was working for a cause as well. And the cause happened to be hockey in Minnesota.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. It gets to the root of the community and what the people all want to get behind, and really gets everybody entrenched in the organization. So you mentioned earlier how important hockey is to the high school level, to the college level. Like it's really important in the area of Minnesota. College Hockey Inc. Give us a little bit of the background, the purpose, the mission. What are you guys doing, and how did you end up getting this position as executive director?
So College Hockey Inc., we're a 3-person nonprofit along with Sean Hogan and Jason Hajdu. Those are my 2 co-workers. So the 3 of us form this little nonprofit or make up this little nonprofit. The organization was created back 12 years ago and 13 years ago now, and I joined it over 10 years ago. So I've been with it for most of the time that it's been around. We were created in the beginning primarily to assist young aspiring hockey players to understand all that goes along with college hockey. And for people who are listening that aren't really following hockey, that might seem like a head-scratching answer. There's a unique aspect to the hockey development model that is not the way that a basketball player grows up playing basketball, that a football player grows up playing football, that a volleyball player grows up playing volleyball. And it's messy and it's hard to understand. And there's this aspect called major junior hockey, which is primarily a Canadian thing. It's a Canadian institution. It's been around forever. And the NCAA considers players that play that professional. Now, whether they are professional or not, that's totally up for debate. I'll acknowledge they certainly don't look professional. They're just young people playing hockey, but it is what it is. And so there are a number of young aspiring hockey players that lose their eligibility as young as 14 and frequently by 16. And so there are many players that give up their eligibility before they even know anything about college hockey or before they know, the facts about college hockey. So we were created to serve as a resource, fits within NCAA recruiting rules, to make sure that if a young person doesn't know what they should know, or that young person's parents, that they have a resource. And then we are, in that regard, we're primarily focused on boys hockey, on men's hockey, because there is not a major junior hockey for women's hockey. So women's hockey is more like basketball. It's more like football in the sense that every 17-year-old girl is eligible, whether she even knows it or not, no different than every 17-year-old boy is eligible for college football and college basketball and whatever it might be. So that's why we were created. But since then, we've evolved to much more than just that, I think. We're very much a marketing, promotions, we like to say storytelling organization to make sure that all the great stories about college hockey are being told by us, being told by others. And why that's needed is, again, adding to the unique aspect of college hockey. And there are many things that make college hockey pretty unique, is that it's played almost entirely in a single sport conference setting. So a school will play all of its other sports, basketball, football, volleyball, in Conference X, a multi-sport conference, but then they play their hockey in Hockey East or ECAC hockey or NCAC, okay? And those organizations are wonderful, but they tend to be smaller staffed and probably not as well equipped to tell the cool stories that are going on. Or if they are, they're going to focus obviously on just stories in their conference. So we look at college hockey as one whole unit. For people who still are scratching their head, and I don't blame them if they are, I think an easy way to look at it is we want college hockey to be connected to all levels of hockey, especially the NHL, the way that college basketball is connected to the NBA and the way that college football is connected to the NFL. So if you think about that, when you watch the Super Bowl and after the first snap, they're going to put up the offensive line for Philadelphia, and those guys are going to tell you what college they went to, If you go to an NBA game tonight, when they introduce the starting lineup, they're going to tell you what college the players went to, right? There isn't that obvious connection yet between college hockey and the NHL. And we feel for the sport to grow, to reach its full potential in the United States especially, we have to tap in as much as possible to the already existing college sports culture that is just so part of our culture overall, not just our sports culture, but our culture overall. So then we added to it this idea of being the organization to take the lead in trying to grow college hockey. So finding new schools to offer it, because it is, again, it's not, I keep saying it's a unique sport. The facility required to play our sport is very unique. And if you don't have one, it's a significant expense. It's not and it's an investment. Yeah. You don't just go out and restripe a field or create a field, it's many millions of dollars. So it almost does require what I would call an advocacy organization like ours, trying to meet with schools and find schools that are able to do it. And Arizona State's probably the one that we talk about most, because that one was such a win for us. But there's other schools that we've worked with. All of them are wins, and we're still in that process. And now is the time to call out that we are partners with the National Hockey League and the National Hockey League Players Association. And full credit to them, they will pay for a feasibility study for any school that wants to consider, any college that wants to consider adding men's or women's college hockey. And so that's been just a huge benefit to us being able to make this work. So that's what College Hockey Inc. is.
I have so many questions and so many follow-ups because it's very interesting to me. We'll start with this. why does the NHL and NHLPA support the college hockey vision versus the major juniors? What is there a reason that they lean that direction?
No, I wouldn't say that it's not that they don't support major junior. They do. They do support major junior.
Yeah.
But culturally, major junior hockey junior hockey is just much more of a Canadian thing. So in Canada, especially in the smaller towns, I think the junior hockey team has a place in people's hearts in those Canadian communities, much like a college team does here in the US, or I would even say, like a high school team does in Minnesota, especially in a small town in Minnesota. It's got its place and it means something, and it's been part of the growth of hockey in Canada. So it's certainly not something where the NHL is not supporting it. But I think what the NHL sees in the US is our culture loves college sports. It just does. I mean, sometimes too much. Okay.
Oh yeah.
All right. Sometimes
that's for sure.
But good or bad, mostly good. They love college sports. And you can see that at what's happened at Arizona State. By them adding hockey, you tap into this living alumni base. And I'd have to go back and look exactly what it is, but it's several 100,000 people. It's like 300,000-400,000 living alumni of Arizona State. And then when you tap into it, many of those people closely identify with being an alumni of Arizona State, or if you're an alumni of Penn State or whatever the school is that you go to, when you ask those people, tell me about yourself, it does not take them long to get to them telling you that they're an alum of ASU. They might go, I'm married, I got 2 kids, I live here, I went to Arizona State. It's like they quickly tell you
part of their story
that matters to them. So I think the opportunity for us, college hockey, when I say us, to do our part to grow hockey in the U.S., to just grow the sport. We have to expand where we are. We have to be coast to coast and border to border, like the NHL now is. Yeah. And when the NHL moves into, a market, you might recall back when they moved to San Jose, there was a lot of people like, what are they doing? They're crazy,
Yeah.
But, that and the success of that, plus Gretzky going to Los Angeles, I think it opened a lot of people's eyes that hockey is such a spectacular sport that wherever it goes, kids point to it and say, I want to play that, in spite of there being so many hurdles to playing the game. Facility, it's not a running-based sport. There's equipment required. The sport flourishes. So full credit to the NHL for growing. Full credit to USA Hockey for going out there and getting arenas built and creating hockey players everywhere in this country. But college hockey was a little bit behind that in terms of moving outside of its kind of New England, through Michigan, through Wisconsin, Minnesota, North Dakota. That was kind of its footprint. Then it had a nice little thing going on in the state of Colorado and the state of Alaska, and that was it, And then so expanding that footprint was vital to us. And then fortunately, with some generous people, Arizona State happened. And now you see down there that not only does the existing student body love it, but their alumni love it. And I went to an Arizona State game at the University of Minnesota, and it was noteworthy how many people from Arizona State were at that game. And I didn't do research, but my guess was it was a lot of alumni living in the Twin Cities that finally had an opportunity to dig out their ASU sweatshirt and, go relive their time at ASU.
Right.
I would say that just imagine if Alabama and Auburn each had a 4,500 seat on campus arena, and this weekend they were playing each other with the SEC title on the line. Or if Oregon and Washington, and they were playing in Oregon, and the marketing machine behind the Oregon Ducks got involved in hockey, okay? And we tapped into all those alumni bases throughout the country. That would absolutely grow the sport of hockey, because college athletics and colleges matter so much. So I think it's worth our while for those of us that love the sport, that want to see more kids playing the sport, that want to diversify the sport in all ways, including geographics. I don't know if there will ever be an NHL team in Oklahoma City that can do that, but if the Sooners can offer big-time hockey, that would be a very, very close.
It's a good growth point.
Yeah.
It's funny. I grew up in New England, so I grew up in Massachusetts, and we grew up playing every winter. We'd play on the ponds. We'd be out every day as often as we could. We'd have, nets stashed in the woods that we'd pull out to play. one of the guys I played with growing up ended up in the NHL for 17 years. Like that was just the way that we all grew up and played. They all played at regional colleges in the area. I thought everybody lived that way. And then I started moving around the country for different jobs and I'm like, oh, nobody else does this, you know? So it's funny that the culture of hockey starting young. And you're right, that initial the investment in facilities and et cetera, and it's not everywhere. So to spread that message and that potential is such a valuable course of action. So I am drawn back to one of your first original points of, trying to convince or market the brand or to teach young people that the college pathway is a very productive one that can get you to the NHL. How do you do that? How do you scale that message and reach enough people? Because that seems like could be a difficult process to get that message out there. How do you go about it? Do you do events? Like, how do you do it?
All of the above. Yeah, and then since COVID and the world's adoption of virtual, Zoom or whatever it might be, that's even added another opportunity for us to do it. But multiple ways, and also it depends on where our audience is. Okay.
Yeah.
So if we're talking to somebody from Boston, like where you grew up, or where I am, Minnesota. And they're involved in hockey, they absolutely have an understanding of college hockey and a perception of it as being cool. I mean, the bean pots.
Invaluable.
Yeah.
A logical pathway. There's so many NHL players that came out of Hockey East. Yeah. Like it was normal for us to take that path.
For sure. And things like I said, the bean pot, which starts on Monday.
Oh, yeah.
That type of thing, or just the rivalries that exist everywhere in college hockey. So if we're talking to 100%. A young player in suburban Boston, or we're talking to a young player in Minnesota, we know that college hockey is probably what they think of as, if not the only route to the NHL, the predominant route to the NHL. Okay. If we're talking to a young person in rural Saskatchewan, or anywhere in Canada, we realize that their awareness of it is less, but also their desire. And I think that's really important. It's we got to talk to your head and we got to talk to your heart. If we're talking to a kid in Boston or a kid in Minnesota, we probably know that we have their heart, we have a lot of their head. So it's almost like reinforcing what they already think. Okay.
Yeah.
And then you're talking to somebody, whether it's in Canada or Europe, or even areas of the U.S. where there isn't college hockey. So like I said earlier, great on the NHL and USA Hockey for now having all sorts of hockey in California and Texas and Florida. Now it's on us to get college hockey teams out there so that every Monday or every Friday and Saturday, they're falling in love with college hockey a little bit every weekend of the winter. Okay. But right now, for the most part, those kids aren't experiencing that. So the first thing I would say is we have to tailor our message to where our audience is. And Europe's a bigger audience now. The number of European players playing NCAA hockey has more than quadrupled just in the past decade. So our sport's becoming worldwide. So we do it with in-person seminars. We do it with virtual seminars. We do it with one-on-one, whether it's a phone conversation or a virtual meeting with targeted players that we're aware of. We also do it social media-wise. Our Twitter and our Instagram are pretty impactful. Our Twitter account has over 60,000 followers. So we do that. We try to take advantage of other people with a voice. So we work closely with ESPN, TNT, the NHL Network, organizations that broadcast NHL hockey to make sure that they hopefully are working college hockey content into their broadcasts as often as possible. And then we do it by also working with advisors and agents. Maybe not a great necessarily, how should I say this, just aspect of young player hockey today is the influence that paid professionals are having on their decision-making process. Okay, I think I'm saying that pretty politically.
Yeah, I think you're doing it well.
All right. But
my poli-sci major is coming into work right now. Yeah, I got it.
Yeah, there you go. But the reality is a lot of young players, 13-year-old players their families paying somebody to give them advice. So we've got to make sure that who's ever giving that advice has facts and understands all that is wonderful about college athletics and college hockey. And then also has a resource that if they encounter a question, they don't run from the question. They know that they can contact us. So, and I say all that, most of the advisors that we work with are actually really good people. But it's just kind of like the notion that, as you talked about when you were a kid and what it was like and what it's like now,
Oh, yeah.
it's just a reality that you have to deal with. So we're trying to influence the media to see the value of college hockey. We're trying to get to people through social media. We go where people are and meet with them in person, and then we meet with them virtually and stuff. So like I said, all of the above.
Mike, I'm so appreciative of your time and sharing so much into the college hockey story and your background. We'll finish off with this just to give everybody a little bit of last advice. So you have a lot of background in corporate sales, ticket sales. You've worked in marketing, executive director, college hockey. That sales knowledge, I know a lot of people out there that don't necessarily want to work in sales. They don't see that being their fit, but that's what stirs the drink in our industry is that revenue stream. How important looking back is having that kind of base knowledge of how those lines of revenue work and those opportunities and what's going to move the needle for a business. How important is it to have that kind of a background that can kind of propel you to certain heights and pivot your career in different methodologies later?
For me, it was very important. I don't want to say that you can't get there without doing it, but I think it's a great foundation. If you don't have people that are paying money to take in what it is you're selling, whether that's buying a ticket, watching on TV, buying a jersey, whatever it might be, then you're just not going to exist, because that's why it happens. Youth hockey happens because it's a great way for a 12-year-old person to learn life lessons, But the NHL is not around so Connor McDavid can learn life lessons. You know what I'm saying? It's around because it's a business and they want people to be able to consume it, and however they do that. So I would say it's critically important. It fits my personality, though. It's you can be competitive in a good way. And I found I thrived off that. My family knows these stories, but even back when I was in elementary school and we'd have like magazine sales for fundraisers, I got into that. I loved going door to door and selling magazines. And then for a while there, I was selling gum in junior high school and learned just like, hey, it's fun. It's fun to provide something of value to somebody, and they're willing to give you money back, And I don't look at sales as some people have. I think some people are just hung up on the idea of being in sales, and I looked at it like, you're giving somebody of value, you're improving their life, and they know what. So long way of saying, absolutely vital for me. I enjoyed the heck out of it. It really got me off on the right foot. And then I was able to start to do more because of it, but I don't think I'd have the opportunities I had today if I hadn't succeeded at being in sales.
Such great advice. Mike, great conversation. Thanks so much for coming on the show and teaching us more about College Hockey Inc. and your background. So much great advice to come out of that conversation.
Absolutely. I enjoyed it, Brian, and thank you for asking me.
Thanks to Mike for coming on the show. What incredible advice. Mike really understood this audience and thought, if I'm going to come on the show, I'm going to drop some knowledge and share some advice that is going to make a difference for people. So I hope you felt that and can apply that to your work life and your work strategies right now, because I sure as heck can. There was a lot that I learned from that as well. Thanks to Mike. Thanks to all of you for listening. And please continue to rate, review, and subscribe. That's how we stay high in the podcast rankings and other people can discover us. That's super important for us as we continue to grow. Thanks for being here. Thanks for continuing to listen. And we'll see you on Monday.